Hey there, welcome to ATL and 29, a podcast that looks at the NBA from the starting point of Atlanta. I'm here with Tyler Jones and Glenn Willis. My name is Kevin Chenard. We're recording late on draft night or maybe following draft morning, depending on where we are. And it's Zaccharie Risacher. Uh, practice our French accents. What are your initial takeaways here? Who wants to go first?
Let Glenn
Hi,
go.
Tyler.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Glenn.
okay. Well, I mean, hat tip to Jonathan Givony. He had this the whole way. I think
Yep.
he might have been the only person who had this the whole way. I mean, what was it, like an hour, 45 minutes before the draft, Woj was reinforcing the idea that was gaining momentum. I mean, it's interesting. So for me, I got asked to do a lot of different mock drafts, different outlets, like the last month. I've never been asked before. I assume it's because the Hawks had the first pick that, that there was like we're doing the lottery or whatever. And half of those I took Ricochet for the Hawks. And as I try to think about how I wanted to kind of use different strategies and different examples of those, size at the wing defenders, was just the thing that like was a problem every single game even the games they won, it was something they had to overcome. And so in that sense, it makes sense. Now, all the Hawks fans I talked to on Twitter, and I jumped into a Twitter Spaces, not long after the pick. I mean, a lot of Hawks fans are pissed off. They wanted Sarr. They thought there was something else. Now, I appreciate most of them offer their thoughts in thoughtful ways, and are willing to participate in constructive dialogue and things like that. But it does feel like I don't know what the sense was in the building tonight, Kevin, but different experience maybe on social media always. Um, but it doesn't seem like the immediate reaction is a fan base that's like super excited about the guy they drafted tonight, you know. And I don't mind people asking questions and say, I wish they'd have taken Sar, I wish they would have taken Klingon or whatever, whichever way it goes. What I dislike in those conversations though is people who are like, I'm right, I know they screwed up, right? Like he got drafted 4 hours ago, was it?
Yeah.
Roughly 4 hours. Like, and you think you already know how this is going to go? Come on. So for me, I want Tyler to kind of give some of his thoughts, recap some of his thoughts on Twitter because I thought there was some great stuff that Tyler put out tonight too. But it was an obvious, prominent roster gap and issue and problem last year, and they prioritized it in the direction they chose to go tonight.
Uh, my takeaway is I've liked Saul. I mean, I like Ricochet the entire time. Um, I think when the Hawks first got the number one overall pick, that was the name I put out there first. While everybody was talking about Sar, it's one of those things where I get the Sar like, but I don't. What I don't understand is the degree to which Hawks fans liked him as a player, relative to the other players in this draft class. Um, I just like overall, there was never just that one guy in this draft. That was clear, last year all throughout the season. And so, you look at it, you know, in a way, like Reese 6'10", has a great jump shot with a quick release, and he's a good defender. Like, I mean, I watch, you watch a couple games of him. Yeah, he'll make young kid mistakes, but overall, like he's executing the game plan. He's keeping guys in front of him. He's helping. He's being the low man. He's helping off rebounds, and then on offense, like it's so impressive to see a young guy play as hard as he does when he doesn't know when he's going to get the ball. Like they didn't run any sets. Like they didn't. Ricochet was not somebody who was given the ball and go cook, or was like got all these opportunities. He made the most out of what he got on his team because that was the role that he was in. and I was impressed with his mental toughness. Like it whether he got the ball or not, he was going to play hard. He was going to defend. He was going to execute. So, like, and to me, that mirrors kind of what the last couple drafts the Hawks have been looking at. Like, just guys were willing to do the little things consistently. That's something just over this really since the Trae Young era. Like this, that's a thing this team has struggled with. Like guys just consistently doing the things they need to do in order to win games on a per possession basis. And so, like, I'm I'm happy. Like I'm ultimately happy with the pick. Uh, I also just think like the fans that are at the arena who saw the pick and then heard him talk, like I feel like fans are gonna warm up to him. Like he seems like a great kid, and so like the initial crying about it, like it's just it's social media, like and it's understandable. Like it's just kind of how people want to vent their feelings and they feel like it's the worst thing ever. When I'm like, look, you get somebody this wing talent in Quinn Snyder's system at a young age, I feel like you're going to get the most out. You're going to get the best outcome of that player. And like to me, I've always felt like Risacher has great bones of a good to great player. So that's where I'm at right
Yeah, if this draft goes down as the one where you really aren't going to have a whole lot of superstar players, if this wasn't a superstar rich draft, especially at the very top end, which I think has been on everybody's radar for at least a couple of years now, then you get the very best role player. Now, maybe Klingon, I think, has potential to be, one of the best role players. Shepard, maybe he can be kind of a superstar kind of player, but it's going to be a risky gamble. He's probably in a good spot there in Houston that kind of frame what he does. But like, if you're not getting the superstar, then like get the very best role player. And it feels like they got the very best role player in the draft, especially the one that's kind of tailored to their needs. And so, like, if you're thinking about it as well, how do you get a superstar? Maybe you don't in this draft, but the Hawks kind of have one in Jalen Johnson, and he needs the pieces around him so that he can be a superstar. And
now.
this feels like a big step in that direction for reasons that will probably go on for like the next half an hour. I want to get through them, but I don't want to make a giant soliloquy out of this. But I just think that, like Tyler is saying, he mentioned a couple of things, like, just doing all the little things, and especially, what he can do from the small forward position as kind of a helping low man, which may have been the thing that like the Hawks were worst at. Kind of two things. Like, if it wasn't DeAndre Hunter playing small forward, pretty much every other player on the
Yep.
roster, when they were helping as a small forward from like as the low man from the weak side corner, was just disastrous. Like
Yeah.
it was disastrous for Garrison Matthews. It was disastrous for Sadiq Bey. There just were no answers when it wasn't Hunter. And so that's just going to make things go so much more smoothly for the Hawks if they can get those little kind of things picked up. And I think that's going to be a very, very, very big little thing that really changes their future. And with something that really, it's funny that everything's kind of cyclical, but it mirrors what was going on in the finals, because the whole finals was just like a war about who can you get
Exactly.
in as who's going to be the help man. We're going to try to force you to use him as the help man. But we're going to, if we get our way about it, we're going to have him as the help man. And so like, there's this tug of war that goes on in these games. And like, the more options you have on the floor that are functional as a low man helping from the weak side, the harder it is for the other team to kind of pick your poison and say, yeah, it's going to be him and we're going to make him look bad.
Yeah, and we saw a perfect synopsis of that in the finals, right? I mean, Boston would not let you dictate who was going to be low, who was going to be help, who was getting into the switch, right? And Dallas could not keep the defensive alignment they wanted at all, like the whole series. And so the more kind of versatility you have, the better chance you have to say, no, you're not putting Trey as low man. We're not letting that happen. And so I think that's I have a cat that wants to jump in the
I'm laughing
conversation.
because Glenn's cat is making a big cameo, just completely solar eclipsing Glenn's camera.
I just got home from work finally, like 20 minutes ago, and he's usually like all over me when I get home. Anyway, I'll have to ask him later what he thinks of the draft pick. But so for me, it's that versatility. But it's interesting because I saw notes on his first uh availability of media, and one thing that jumped out at me, he said a number of different things. But one thing he said, I think maybe the last thing he said was, "We got to shoot it." We
Yep.
got to shoot it. And I'm like, he already is parroting
Undis-
Glenn, right?
yep.
We got to shoot it. And that was just something that I was like, wow, it's kind of impressive that it seems like that's sticking already, with him. And this was an hour, maybe less than an hour after he got drafted. And so I felt like, I don't people wanted to say, oh, Sar wouldn't say that, or Sar was pushing back on this, or Sar didn't want to do this or that. And it kind of seemed like there's plenty of reason to have a question about what would Sar want to buy into, what would Sar not want to buy into. I'm not saying that it's not fair to say I don't know like what Sar, but I don't want to say I know what Sar is thinking or what Sar expects, right? But I mean, I think when we heard him talk tonight, I thought Risacher, it kind of made it clear, like, I'll do whatever you
Do
know.
whatever it
And
takes.
Quinn talked
He said
all
that.
last year about buy-in, connectivity, principles, habits, all that stuff. And Ricochet, in that setting, at least, sounded like a guy who gets it and is willing to say, "Yeah, I'm going to do the work, whatever the work is. I'm going to do the work." And that was, I think, encouraging
And Glenn, the film backs that up 100%. Like
for sure.
the film 100% backs up. He does whatever is asked of him to do or what he feels like needs to be done in order to win the game. And like I wanna just talk about the idea of a role player because it's such a it's become such a pejorative for some reason. And it annoys me. I'm like, Al Horford is one of the greatest role players in NBA history. Draymond Green is one of the greatest role players in NBA history. Klay Thompson is one of the greatest role players in NBA history. Like, you can be currently the Celtics, the Boston Celtics as a team are a team full of role players around two superstar two-way wings. That's how they built their team. But they're the best role players in the game of basketball, and they have two things that they do elite: shoot and shoot through contests, and defense, like all around defense, point of attack defense, low man defense. It's just like this. This is what the Hawks need. Like I feel like Zaccharie Risacher is a clear line from what the Hawks did in the last drive, Kobe Buffkin and Mo Gay. I want people to remember in 2023, Cam Whitmore, super talented basketball player, fell to the Hawks, and they said no, thank you. We want Kobe. And and like it was kind of a controversial decision. But you watch Kobe play. Granted, he didn't play much in the NBA, but you watch him in the G League, and then you watch the short stints he had in the NBA. You get it. He does like Kobe does the little things. Kobe plays hard. Kobe rebounds. Kobe defends. He plays with physicality on both ends of the floor. And I feel like Zaccharie Risacher, even though Kobe and Zaccharie don't have the build that you would expect of guys like this, they're going to do the little things. And it's just not an element of what the Hawks have constantly had star talent players, but not enough of guys who will do the grunt work in order to get you over the hump or extend your winning margin. Like that, and so to me, I'm like, especially, I mean, just because he's a role player, quote unquote, now doesn't mean he can't expand his game the older he
Right.
gets, the more mature he gets. Like it's just his foundation is like his fundamentals are so good right now, where I'm like, guys, if he shoots it like it with volume and good efficiency and plays good defense, that's a good player that the Hawks haven't had. Like they DeAndre Hunter has the defense, but ultimately his offense is always kind of hit and miss just because of how robotic he is. That's not Risacher's game. He's a more fluid basketball player. He's more intuitive offensive
Yeah,
player.
yeah. I think you expect more offensive consistency from a guy like Risacher, right? Like you said, Hunter hit and miss on offense, and the misses are like bad.
Yeah.
Like when it's bad, it's bad, right? As much as I love, like I know I talk all the time about how much I love Hunter's team defense also, right? It- the thing for me is I want to go back to the role player thing, but I want a little put a little pin in this. What will determine if he could be like an all-star, maybe a multi-time all-star, is if he can actually develop some guard-like skills on offense, right? If he becomes a guy who can run a pick and roll, becomes a guy who can like do more than catch and shoot, can attack a closeout and drive and kick, and if he can kind of develop that part of his game, that's going to be a different factor for the Hawks, and I think that's kind of the swing area on is he a quasi all-star? Is he a multi-time all-star, or is he just, one of the elite role players? But you think about like teams that have worked and built up and built up and built up and tried to get to a championship, right? I remember KCP went to the Lakers. I know Anthony Davis did too, but like KCP had a lot to do with the Lakers winning the championship. KCP goes to Denver, what happens? Drew goes to Milwaukee, what happens? Drew goes to Boston, like right. It's often the role players, the high level role players that put you over the top.
Yep.
Right. Now the Hawks don't have that kind of roster yet. Like they're still building out the other like Trey's phenomenal, like I think, right? But the rest of the pieces aren't there. And we hope that Jalen shows a lot more next year. And we hope that as Ricochet comes along, he provides more consistency. It's not just Bogey providing spacing for Jalen. There's a
Thank
second
you.
guy now, right? And we hope that Jalen becomes that guy that makes you feel like, man, we're maybe a role player or two away from really being up there at the top of the league. But you go look at the last whatever 8, 9, 10 championships. Iguodala, amazing role player, right? You mentioned Draymond, right? And you can go look at a role player that was added to them that got them from being like fourth, fifth, sixth best team in their conference to all the way top and oftentimes the championship. The fact that Toronto got Danny Green and that trade with Kawhi too was
Huge.
massive for their championship, right?
They weren't winning that
So
title.
it is a big deal.
It's
Yeah.
funny that can I interject for a second? It's funny that
Yeah.
you brought up KCP tonight because I was thinking in those same terms, but almost in a negative sense. Not because he's a negative player, because with all those names that you just mentioned, he's just like this, off the charts role player. But being a functional 2-point scorer, having some creativity, being able to do things in the pick and roll, like those are huge swing skills for Risacher going forward. Because like we saw in that Denver Minnesota series, Denver was just crying out for some more creativity, for some more offense from people who weren't Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. They needed one other like creative kind of scorer to really put them over the top in that series, and they just didn't get it. And it's that difference between role player and being something a little bit more than a role player, even if you're so good at the role player part.
Yeah, it's such a great observation, Kevin, because in with the Lakers, you have Anthony Davis, who has phenomenal offensive skill for his position, right? Same in Denver, Jokic, phenomenal, right? And maybe if Murray was 100%, it goes a little bit differently. But then we saw the same problem in a bigger way in Minnesota. When Minnesota ran into Dallas, it was Anthony Edwards and like literally nobody else could like create offense. And so it really is important for the Hawks to invest in that part of his development as well. And Landry talked about it in his availability, like, hey, we believe in him on both ends of the court, that sort of thing. But the amount of offensive development he realizes is going to have a lot to do with who else do they need to put around him, and those sorts of things. And you hope that it goes well. And I got asked to show up in a Twitter space, for a while, and my friend Tim over who was part of the Sport Ethos Hawks podcast, everybody's kind of having this freak out, and my buddy Ant, who was hosting the space, like put everyone on mute. It was like everybody chill out, right? And not long as we got going again, Tim said, And for those people who are worried about Risacher, I'm going to remind you what Ryan Schmidt did last year at College Park, and Ryan Schmidt's now going to be on the Hawks coaching staff. To me, that is such a factor in what I expect Risacher to become in year one, year two, year three. They showed last year they can develop players. Like I mentioned too, like I piggybacked on Tim's comment and I said, I mean, V played like a month at College Park, and they turned him into a completely different player. I mean, it was crazy. And so I
V
do think like this isn't the era. I know we talk about time when Nate's saying we're not doing development, right? I mean, they're doing development, and that
Yep.
and that is a big part of why I think Hawks fans can be encouraged about this draft pick.
V went from a horrid defensive player, like just like always getting rolled over, never in the right spots, just somebody who the Hawks couldn't play. Like the previous season, that's why they cut him. Like they were like, he's just another bad defender. We can't use this type of player. He went from that, and then a month in the G League with Schmidt, and he came out as legitimately the best point of attack defender on the team, the best one I've seen in the Hawks uniform since Dylan Wright, probably. And like, just even though he didn't have the frame, super physical. Kobe Buffkin, the same way. Kobe was a good defender in college. Kobe, when he was healthy and he finally got the call up and he's getting minutes, he looked like an all defense caliber player, like all over the floor, absolutely cutting, got elite, like offensive player, staying like hip to hip with Kyrie Irving, not giving him Kyrie any space, completely shutting somebody like Jalen Green down on defense, while at the same time being a rim protector, like challenging shots at the rim with centers on lobs attempts, like Derek White does. To me, I'm like, you get somebody who's 6'10", like Risacher, who's willing to put in the work and the effort to be great. Like that's what's important. Like the kid wants to win and he wants to be great. And so like I just feel like with Schmidt and with Quinn's offensive system, it's a good incubator to create a superstar. Whereas, if like it's a good environment for him. Like the Hawks don't need him to be a creator.
Right.
He can get there. He can get there on his own terms.
Yeah.
Trey and Jalen will make it easy for him. Yeah. So I'm to me, I'm excited because it feels like the Hawks have a plan and they're executing on it, and they're not rushing steps. They're not skipping steps. They understand that it. They skipped steps when they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, and the last couple seasons have been the result of those skip steps. But since Quint's taken over, and they've just been executing on their plan, on their vision of what this team want to look like, which is getting more two-way talents up and down the position spectrum.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, I think when we first discussed like the whole list of prospects at the beginning, one of the things I tried to say was that, if you let Quinn Snyder pick his player in this draft, he would pick Risacher. Like, because, he wants somebody that's going to eventually get to that 0.5 second decision making. I'm not sure he has that yet, but he has enough that is like, okay, I can see that happening. But, the Hawks are dying for more functional size across the roster.
Mm-hmm.
And for a small forward, Risacher is a factor defensively at the rim. He gets in the way. And that impacts the game a few different ways. One is that if he's a point of attack defender, which he may be at some times this season, it's not like that's necessarily the thing he's greatest at, but he appears to be functional at it. And when he is the point of attack defender, there are going to be times where, like it or not, you're going to end up switching, even if you didn't want to switch. And he's going to be big enough at times that if you get a switch that you didn't want to get, he's still going to be able to kind of get in the way a little bit with that big and make the pass difficult and use his size in that way. But even beyond that, like if you look at what's on the Hawks roster right now and what Quinn asks them to do and what they do kind of pretty well, they're a really good offensive rebounding team. Capella's great at it. Sadiq Bey for a forward is really good at it. Jalen's pretty good at it. They've got this, team that can really hit the offensive glass. Okong was good at it too. And Quinn wants them to do it. And, he's often bringing in guys from the corner to crash the glass. But to do that, your transition defense is going to suffer. And, with a Trey DeJounte backcourt, like they just have not had the functional size to have a transition defense put together where these other guys can go crash the glass. And hey, if they do and it doesn't work out, we've still kind of got the back end covered. Let me get my stats here. The Hawks were egregiously bad in transition defense in terms of this. They fouled more than any other team in transition trying to defend. And they were 30th out of 30, and they were like outlier bad level 30. Like the gap between 29 and 30 was bigger than the gaps from like 25 to 29. Like they just could not help themselves from fouling in transition because they just had no other thing that they could do. They didn't have the functional size to break up a fast break. And, if Quinn is really going to do what he wants to do, offensively, defensively, and that mix between crashing the glass and getting back, like Risacher has the potential to be one of the guys who gets back to disrupt things.
Yeah, and when Kobe played last year, he was often committed to being first guy back, get everybody organized, calling all the matchups and who's got who and things like that. And I'm like, yeah, Ryan Schmidt programmed that into him. So it is huge. Like I was joking as you were saying that, like as you were saying the Hawks like took more fouls. I was just thinking a nonstop montage of Bogey taking fouls in transition because he literally couldn't do anything else. It probably wasn't 80% Bogey, but it feels like it was 80% Bogey in those situations. But and
It's him or Trey Young reaching.
yeah,
Like, yeah. So it's
yeah,
those two.
yeah, and that's the thing is like those are your like two of your offensive workhorses. You can't have them foul trouble. Like that's a problem. And it's funny because I was mentioning the other day uh about Oklahoma City. I forget who I was talking to on Twitter, but I was mentioning that they strategically traded opponent second chance points. They gave up the second most opponent second chance points. So when you sent to the board, if you didn't get it, they were gonna punish you with their own fast break. And they were seventh in fast break points. So they were like plus 1.8 in that exchange, right? And I wonder if you ask, Mark Degno, how do you feel about how that went? He's probably like, oh, I wanted more, for on our side of that formula. And when people ask, like, because we got a little pushback, I would say pushback. We got some interesting feedback on our conversation about Jalen playing center and last time we got together. And one thing that teams are doing more and more is like, you want to send two to the glass? If you don't get the ball, you're dead. Like you are dead, right? We're going. And it's just in OKC, like certainly was the team doing that sort of on steroids. Like they did that the whole season long. It'll be interesting to see if other teams kind of start kind of getting into that mode as well, especially if you're playing 5 out heavy lineups like that, where they're like, okay, yeah, we're going to give you some second chance points, but we're going to, I mean, a point, a shot in transition is generally easier than even a second chance shot at the half court, right? Typically. So you're trading typically lower, quality shots for higher quality shots. And this, I can't wait to see this next season, how many teams kind of lean into those analytics.
Yeah, I mean, and to get sort of player specific, sometimes I say things, 2 sentences ahead and just skip the basic thesis. But when you watch the videotape, he uses his size. Like he's not a bursty athlete. He's only barely 19, and so you don't see any real strength with him yet. But he uses his length. Like he's smart enough. He gets himself in the right positions where he makes an impact defensively just being big, like just quick feet and reach and range. His wingspan isn't like towering, but his standing reach is like 8'11", which is bigger than like Trey Murphy. Like he's a big kid. And that just impacts the game in a lot of ways when you can have somebody who's not a rim protector, protect the rim. Like he just gets in the way a lot.
He's not like, I would describe him though as like quick twitch, where he's very, when he makes the decision to challenge the shot, like he will surprise guys just how fast he gets there and how, like, without fouling. And that's how, like, I can see him being a guy who not only has the low end, but also being like a somebody who could maybe rack up some steals or deflections in passing lanes. Where if you watch DeAndre, like DeAndre's always like a tick late when he goes for it, just because he doesn't have that burst when he sees that he can get a steal, he just doesn't necessarily have that reaction speed to get there on time. Whereas Risacher, once he makes a decision, he's there. Like if he sees a lazy pass or like uh the the offensive player's not paying attention, he'll get the ball. Like and then he's on with the fast break where he's very like things where I see higher upside of him is his transition play with the ball in his hands because he's a fast dribbler, especially in the full court setting, similar to Jalen, where if you don't put a body on him, he will get to the front of the rim very quickly. So it's just it's exciting to get another type of athlete, not necessarily the explosion that Jalen has, but similar, like tall, like similar, like elite size for his position, plus athletic, like functional athleticism. Not like he's not going to be a jump out the gym guy, but like there's a level of fluidity and functional athleticism that the Hawks have not had in the forward position. I've somewhat started comparing him to Cam Reddish, but I mean he's a much better, like, to me he's a better like athlete than Cam was, but similar in that there were, like, Cam was a fluid guy. The difference is that Risacher is just like his fundamentals are just better at the same age. Like Cam's just, I mean, he still struggles with offensively in particular, just consistently making open shots and having a consistent jump shot, really. Whereas Risacher seems to, like, it's hard not to love like his shot release, everything about his form. He has some stuff he needs to work on, but like you could see like there's movement shooting potential in his game just based on how he gets his shots up. So that's where I see the upside from, just beyond being simply a role player. And by the way, elite role players get paid near max money. Check out what OG's about to make. 215 over 4 seasons. So like because those guys are true difference makers. Like they have such an impact on winning, and the Hawks need more guys like that, just to reach that next level, more so than like a superstar next to Trae Young.
Uh, I feel like we touched on a little bit. Maybe this is a slightly different version of the same question or not, but like, what do you feel like is the swing skill that's going to sort of make or break whether this works out for the Hawks? Like, what with it development wise, like what just has to go right for him to live up to what the Hawks were hoping for?
I mean, I think it's the on-ball stuff on offense. I think if you can, even if it's just second unit, helping create, helping run the offense, things like that, some pick and roll, even if it's second side pick and roll, and just the decisiveness and attack. I mean, what Quinn wants is like when the defense is tilted, you attack that space, you attack that seam, and so it's that. And if he can do any kind of quasi primary stuff, if he can take if a 6'3" guard gets switched on to him and he can take advantage of that, right? Like if you can like let him attack one on one when he gets a mismatch, I mean that's that. So for me, it's like what layers of offense can they kind of develop into him, and to me, that's what will determine the ceiling outcome for him. The defense, I think, is going to work just pretty naturally.
Yeah, I think it's his driving. Like, can he become, because he has such good burst when he has like when he has when he has a seam, like he's very good at attacking it and getting downhill. But can he create without that advantage situation? And can he create advantages for others is something that we're gonna have to wait to see because he doesn't have that in his toolbox right now. But like that's where that's what separates the like the OGs from like the the Jason Tatum's. You know, just the ability to get downhill, get to the front of the rim, collapse the defense, and kick out without the need of like a Trae Young setting him up to do that to begin the possession.
Yeah, I mean that seems like that's going to be the biggest challenge for him. I agree. All right, well, we've got a whole summer.
Yeah, we'll have to see the Hawks pick tomorrow. Have no idea if they will or not. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see him in the development environment. So I think that's great.
Well, I thank you for staying up late. Good night, Bob.
Good night,
Good
Bob.
night.